Time now for Just South of Buffalo here on the People's Newscast. And joining us now is Dr. Fred Hoffman from Mercyhurst University.
Indeed.
Sir, we had Secretary of State Marco Rubio come out today and announce that Ukraine and the United States, I guess I should say, have reached an agreement for a 30-day ceasefire deal. The thing is, though, it's not the United States and Ukraine. You have to get Russia to the table as well, sir. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so here's the thing, is you look at the weak points on both sides, for the Ukrainians and for the Russians. For the Ukrainians, we cut them off from intelligence, we cut them off from military equipment. These are pain points. What are the pain points for the Russians?
Just a sec, Doctor. Is your mic on, sir? Just want to make sure for you.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
So, what are the Russians' pain points? Because again, you've got an autocracy, and it's really Vladimir Putin who's making the decisions, right? So, whereas in Ukraine, you've got a bunch of people around Zelensky and interacting with him. He was, by the way, not in Saudi Arabia for the negotiations. So what are our points of leverage with the Russians? Maybe more severe sanctions. Because here's the thing, under the Biden regime, they look to sanctions as being the primary way to defeat the Russians. The problem is a lot of the European countries went around sanctions, sold to third countries, Kyrgyzstan, other countries around the periphery. Their imports went through the roof because they were then turning it around and shipping it into Russia, right? So we've got to figure out, it's probably going to be economic, principally sanctions, and I think also a lot of what the Trump administration has been doing up until this point has been what I would call like kabuki theater, right? In other words, it's messaging to the Russians at the same time as messaging to the Ukrainians, with the intent being, let's get both sides together at the table and bring this to a halt.
Now, what did you make of this becoming news today, that there's talks of a deal and that Ukraine's agreed to a deal, when we saw the interaction between the president as well as Zelensky and Vice President Vance in the Oval Office?
Yeah, well, that's like three-dimensional chess, you know what I mean? Because what you have is, number one, there's a history with Trump and Zelensky that has not been a positive one. Personally, from what I've seen, and I've been monitoring the situation with Russia and Ukraine.
Penned an op-ed on it, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, for a long time. But the thing is, those two have a history, personal history. The whole impeachment during Trump's first term centered on what was going on in Ukraine. So, I mean, you've got all of that layered on top of everything else. And I really do think that Trump's approach is, we got to get both sides to the table and they have them agree on something.
Does he almost put his businessman hat on to get them to negotiate here?
Definitely. He's about as non-politician as they come. Yeah. Right? When he says art of the deal, this is basically it. And there's a lot, and it's interesting because a lot of the folks that I follow on social media that are supportive of Ukraine are more kind of center-left, right? And there's a lot of people say, well, he's a Russian asset. I haven't seen any evidence to support that, right? I really think that this is basically, because here's the thing, it's not just Trump. It's Mike Waltz, his national security advisor, Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense. The other people around him, they're not all Russian assets too, you know what I mean? But they're in lockstep on board saying, here's what we've got to do to get negotiations going.
Doctor, I love for you to just put your military attaché hat on. Okay. When you have to go to the table and negotiate in this situation, what are you looking for? What do you want them to talk about?
Well, the first thing is you've got to have empathy, right? You've got to understand where the other side is, what they want, where they think they're strong and where they think their vulnerabilities are, and you've got to act accordingly. You know what I mean? And I've had situations like this where I went into meetings where people actually, sitting across the table from people who hated me, and I'm in uniform. Wow. You know what I mean? So you've got to find some sort of common ground, or at least bring the temperature down, and at least have the possibility of substantive discussions. And I don't think we're even there yet.
Doctor, just finally, how do you see this ending then?
I think a lot of it is going to really hinge on what leverage do we have to influence the Russian side. Now, what's interesting is the Ukrainians, if we give them the ability to do a lot of what they've been doing lately, so they've figured out how to defeat Russian glide bombs, for example. They've developed their own autonomous drones. They've developed a lot of military capability. Ukrainians are smart folks, right? Even in the Soviet days, a lot of the military developments took place in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians, if we support them against the Russians and let them hit, like for example, they just hit Moscow last night, right? Let them continue hitting petrochemical facilities, right? You don't have a lot of civilian casualties, but it's a big pain point. for the oligarchs that support Putin. So if they lose a petrochemical facility,
Yeah.
that oligarch might be like, maybe we should, tamp things down and call it quits.
Oh, man, I tell you what, Doctor, I could listen to you all day, especially on a topic like this and having been at those negotiating tables as well.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.